All right, here we go. So today I thought I'd do a video on experienced riders and older riders that buy small bikes. You know, I think the kind of the standard is that the older you get, you're going to go keep buying bigger and bigger motorcycles, you know. And so that begs the question, well, why would an experienced rider or an older rider buy a small bike like this one here? This is my friend Charlene's 2020 KTM 390 Duke. She was just like me, working from home for several months when COVID first kicked in, and working from home gets awfully boring awfully fast. And so what do you do in that time? Well, if you're a motorcyclist, you watch nothing but motorcycle videos, and then you figure out new and creative ways to spend money on motorcycle stuff and motorcycles that, yeah, you don't really need. But it's what we do. We can't help ourselves. She called me up one day and she said, hey, I want to go look at the new Indian Scouts. I'm like, all right, sounds like a good idea. I don't need any excuses to go looking at motorcycles. Boy, all you had to say was motorcycle and I'm there. So we went down to the Indian dealership in Vancouver, Washington, and they have a really big showroom up there. And we looked at a bunch of the different Indians, looked at the Scout and everything, and they have a pretty big selection up there. I think it's Pro Caliber Motorsports. They've got Indian, I think they have BMW in there, they have Kawasaki, they have some Suzuki's, Yamahas. I mean, they're one of those big dealers that carries a little bit of everything. And so the whole time we were there, we kept on kind of gravitating back towards this 390 Duke that was sitting there. And so when Charlene asked the salesman what the price of the 390 Duke was, he quoted her the price, and it was, hell, it was about as much as a brand new one. And it was a 2018 or 2019 model with some miles on it, not a lot of miles. If memory serves, maybe it had 1,000 or a couple thousand at the most. And so she's like, well, gee, I can just go buy a brand new one for the same price. So that's what she did. We went to the local KTM dealer, and they had one on the showroom floor, brand new, and they wheeled it out. And she liked it so much, bought it right then and there. Went back and picked it up a couple days later after they'd done all the setup on it. And so here we are. So why does an older person or an experienced person tend to buy a smaller bike like this? And don't get me wrong, Charlene can buy any bike she wants. It's really not a question of money. And so we can look at some of the pros, look at some of the cons of a bike like this. Some people might consider it a con, but right off the bat, it's going to be the displacement, the motor size. This is listed as a 390, but I think that the actual displacement is somewhere in the 378 cc range, somewhere down there. And people would definitely list that as a con. You know, but it wasn't that long ago, and I guess as you get older, that long ago doesn't seem that long ago. But it wasn't that long ago where a 400cc bike was not a small bike. And, you know, I can tell you firsthand, I've ridden, you know, many small bikes like this, and just because they're not big, giant horsepower machines does not mean they're not capable machines. So, I don't necessarily think I would consider that displacement a con. Now then, when we get to the weight of the bike, this bike is super lightweight. So if we look at the horsepower to weight ratio, we start to see that based on that, it's not so terribly far from, you know, a bike maybe twice its displacement because of its weight. I think, memory serves, this thing is in the 380 pound weight range, maybe 380, 390, somewhere down in there. Maybe soaking wet, it might be 400. But that's what's making up for that smaller motor size. It's just simply that it doesn't require as much horsepower to push that lighter bike. The next thing that we might consider as a con is that this is a very compact motorcycle. I am about 5'10", and I weigh between 170 and 185, depending on the holiday. I mean, this thing feels like I'm on a bicycle almost, because it is so diminutive. Pretty small, compact. Let's see here. Back to the pros and cons. One of the cons, I'm going to say right off the bat too, is because it is a compact motorcycle, its utility is going to be a bit limited. I mean, let's just face it, there's just not that much real estate to put stuff on this bike. And, you know, obviously that was not its design purpose, was for, you know, touring. But again, my philosophy, the best bike to tour on is the one you got. You can adapt anything. Let's see here. So those are my cons for the most part, really. Otherwise, you know, I'm having a hard time coming up with anything that would really bother me about this bike. The seat's a bit firm, but most modern bikes, the seats are more designed to look like they're more streamlined and more appealing to the eye than they are functional. I hate to say it. Most people that want a really nice, comfortable seat will go to the aftermarket. They'll head right to the aftermarket, because all but the stoutest of buttocks will start to get pretty tired on this thing. You'll get the butt burn from the weapon of ass destruction going here. But the handling, boy, the handling is where this thing really pays dividends. Now, another thing to note with the wheelbase being as short as it is. Now, I haven't tested it myself yet. Again, it's a friend's bike, and actually this is the longest I've ever ridden it. I rode it for one really brief ride when she first got it, the first day she got it, but that was it. I mean, I might have gone 2 miles on it, so. But my suspicion is that, you know, the higher the speed on a short wheelbase bike, the more kind of flinchy they get, you know. They want to change direction real easy, real quickly, and maybe sometimes even a bit unpredictably. Whereas a longer wheelbase, like my BMW was, or my Triumph, or any of those other, you know, bigger open road going bikes, they're like riding a freight train. They're just locked in on the rails, you know. Pardon the sniffles. It's a bit chilly out here again today. This is another one of our rare non-rainy days. But the reason I can't do a lot of back roads on this thing right now is that we have had pretty ugly windstorms and rain. I think it was raining over an inch in a day just last week, so so there's a lot of downed branches still on the back roads. A lot of just the slough from the trees blows off and litters the roads out here. Of course, we live in really dense forested areas up here, so that's where a lot of that stuff ends up. Another thing that Charlene did, she put that nice little factory windshield on it right there too. So I think that the people at KTM, they kind of thought that some people would want to do more with these than just maybe a little canyon carving here and there, or putting around town. So they made these items. I don't know if these items were really cheap or not. I think they probably had a pretty good price tag on them. But it really opens up the bike to doing a whole lot more than you would expect it to be able to. And I don't know the fuel range numbers on this thing, the miles per gallon, but I'm sure that it's pretty long-legged. It'll go a long distance on a tank of gas. A real long distance on a tank of gas. Which is fine by me. Another thing to note on these bikes that some people would consider a con too is that it's a really close ratio transmission, and it's geared kind of low. So you find yourself rowing through the gearbox a lot more than you would, say on a larger displacement motorcycle where the gear spacing is a bit further apart. So some people would consider that a con because you're definitely more active with the shifter. And some people would definitely consider that a pro because that way they can keep the motor right in the sweet spot of its rev range, right there where it's making the most power. But that that rev range might be kind of narrow. Maybe a 1500 RPM range in there. And I'm sure it's going to be up at the top of that range too. 8,000, 9,000. But that's okay. KTM builds a rock solid little motor that's designed to spool up really high like that. Another thing that some people would consider a con is that it is a single cylinder motor. We like to call them thumpers. Thumpers because they just kind of sit there and thump, 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 thump along. And because they're thumpers, they tend to be a little bit more vibey. Got a few more vibes coming through the handlebars and coming through the foot pegs. The multi-cylinder engine typically runs a lot smoother, so you don't feel it quite as much. But I've ridden many singles in my time. And I'd say it's right on par with just about every one of them I've ever ridden. It's not the vibes aren't unbearable at all. And of course there are going to be certain rev ranges in the motor where there's going to seem like there's less vibes and more vibes. And again, this is pretty much a brand new motorcycle. It's only got 500 miles on it. So as it runs in, it's probably going to get just smoother and smoother and smoother. And again, when does that matter? When does hard vibrations matter? Mostly if you're running, long stretches. That's when those vibrations really start to inflict their damage. Some people I know have wrist problems or ligament problem, stuff like that, carpal tunnel, where those vibrations become a real annoyance and maybe even painful for some folks. Me, for the most part, I don't have that kind of problem too much. Some bikes will set me off, but I've even had, some of the GSXRs from the 90s when I was riding those, GSXR 1100, that would just about completely put my hands to sleep. It vibrated so bad. There's the Carver Cafe from the movie Twilight. That's where they filmed the restaurant scene there, even though the movie was technically supposed to be filmed in Forks, Washington. I'm embarrassed to say I'm a grown man, and I know that, but I got daughters, so you'll have to forgive me. Some people might look at the videos and say, how come you're not going faster? I go through those corners at 9,000 miles an hour. Now, the reason I'm not going faster is that A, this is not my motorcycle. It belongs to a good friend of mine. And B, I don't typically start hustling any motorcycle until I put some miles on it and I am really comfortable with how that bike is going to perform. And then lastly, of course, as I mentioned earlier, our weather has been really shitty out here. And it is not uncommon to come whipping around a corner and find branches and mud. We did have some mudslides, some landslides this week. So I always take the more cautious approach. But even at this speed, this lower speed, this thing is really fun to ride on this kind of road. The suspension does feel a bit harsh on this. I don't think the front end has any adjustment at all. The thing does feel a bit on the bouncy side, like it's oversprung front and rear. Which I know people go, oh, they're not oversprung, those little bikes, they're undersprung. Yeah, whatever. It really depends on your weight and what you're used to riding. Yeah, boy. I could have a ball on this thing. 3 days in the mountains, you betcha. I could have a ball. Hell, I'm having a ball right now. So we've talked about some of the reasons that an older or an experienced rider would buy one of these. But I think that fundamentally what it really boils down to is being honest with yourself. Being honest with yourself about what kind of riding you intend to do, about what your skill level is. That one is of number one importance. What is your skill level? And is it a bike that you're going to be able to live with every day and be happy with? Those are the important questions. I will admit that in my younger days, I was frequently more concerned with performance numbers and with what I was sometimes way too concerned with what other people thought about my bikes, which is just it's a really vain way to think about things. But when we're younger, we do tend to be a bit more vain anyway. We always want the biggest, baddest, fastest thing. We tend to not really think in practical terms. I guess that's the beauty of being young. But of course, as you get older, you drop those tendencies, those pretentious tendencies. At least most of the people I know do. Some of them still hang on to them, but you drop those tendencies, and then suddenly everything is more about function than it is form. And that's where I'm at, especially at this age in my life. I care more about function than I do form. I don't really give two shits what anybody else thinks of my bikes. If they're working for me and I'm enjoying them, that's all that matters. Period. They can keep their vanity. I do feel bad for some people that go and buy their motorcycles based on what their friends like, I've seen that so many times now. I can't keep track of all the times I've seen that through the years. And then, they'll get that bike, and all of their friends are oohing and ahhing and telling them what a great job they did and everything. But then that bike sits in the garage, for the majority of its life. And within a few years, the guy or the gal ends up just selling it because it never had the function for them in the first place. It was a vanity purchase, And I guess if you got the money to make vanity purchases, I'll be honest with you. If I had the money, I'd have every kind of bike you could imagine sitting in the garage. Hell, my house would be a garage full of bikes if I had the kind of money, and many of them would just be horribly impractical motorcycles too, and I wouldn't care because I could buy them and I'll buy them, and that's what I like to do. But I know that I wouldn't ride those kind of bikes nearly as much as I will ride a simple, fun, reliable motorcycle like this KTM Duke. They just, these bikes like this, they just don't ask a whole lot from you. They just ask that you give them some maintenance every now and then. Try not to ride like a full-blown maniac on them, if you can help it, Lots of bikes out today. Pretty surprised. It is actually pretty cold. The humidity is pretty high too. So I'm always surprised when I see a bunch of bikes out on chilly days. But we're all junkies. That little windshield does do a decent job. It just puts that wind, gets that wind to just clip you right up about the face shield height. I'm pretty impressed by it, actually. I have got such horrible problems with my neck that riding without a windshield is a non-starter for me anymore. I just can't do it. I gotta have some wind protection to protect my neck, just from the, from the buffeting from the helmet. But with that little windshield right there, and maybe just a touch softer seat, yeah, I could mow down the miles on this thing. Like I said, these little bikes, they just don't ask a lot of you. They take no effort to ride, to ride enjoyably, and they take even less effort to ride, quickly at a good clip. Right here, we're running 64, 65 miles an hour, and this little thing isn't even working up a sweat. Not at all bothered by it. Oh yeah, lots of bikes out. Those guys were cold. I could tell they were all doubled over. I got my all-season, or I got my cold season heavy insulated waterproof coat on, a big wintertime heavy gloves. This bike does not have heated grips on it, but she'll definitely probably be putting some of those on soon. I know that she has issues with her hands. One of the things about these kinds of bikes too is people will label them beginner's bikes, or even way more offensive, they'll label them girls' bikes. And I'm floored anytime I hear anybody say that. Maybe if the bike was in fuchsia and it had murals of what's that gal's name from that cartoon, Frozen. Maybe if it was plastered and all of that, either you're a really big fan, or yeah, that might be a girl's bike. Otherwise, as far as the machine goes, man, the machine doesn't care who's on top of it. The machine can give a shit. Care less. This is every bit as capable in a guy's hands as it would be a gal's hands or a new rider. Completely capable in all of those. And I'll tell you what, you will have about 1,000 times more fun on public roads riding a bike like this, much higher in its potential than you'll ever have on a hyper bike. when you're only, you're working with about 15% of its potential. It's just so much funner. Again, the bike isn't asking a whole lot of you. You can get ham-fisted with the throttle. It's not gonna, kick the shit out of you. This thing's got analog brakes. It's got those mechanisms in there to help protect you from yourself. If you get a little ham-fisted, you get a little crazy on the brakes. The throttle, hell, I could probably whack this throttle wide open right now and have zero issues. Now you do that on a big old leader bike, and either you better know how to wheelie or you better know how to crash. One of the two. Very capable motorcycle. Very capable. And it is a bit chilly out here. Definitely chilly. Yeah, maybe that seat would soften up if you rode it long enough. Get that padding to break down a little bit. Incidentally, if you have any comments on the KTM 390 Duke, feel free to leave me a comment down there. Maybe your experience with them, or maybe you are an experienced rider or an older rider who picked one of these up. Maybe what your reasons were for doing that. I'd love to hear it. These videos, I don't monetize these. I just make these videos for the enjoyment of basically getting to borrow my friends' bikes and take them out on rides. No, I make them just because I ran out of videos to watch on YouTube from being at home for so long. So I thought, well, I guess I better contribute some content of my own and do a bunch of rides up here in the beautiful Pacific Northwest in the Portland, Oregon area. Yeah, we do a little bit more than just ride out here. We've got some absolutely beautiful scenery, some beautiful areas. Yeah, the weather's pretty shitty a lot of the times, but when it's not shitty, it's just absolutely gorgeous. Really, really enjoy it. Now this right here road has got a bunch of de-icer on it. And I don't know about any of you, but I swear that de-icer's every bit as slick as ice itself. I think it's even more slick sometimes, to be honest with you. Stupid de-icer. Yeah, so now I'm just doing a big loop. I'm going to do a big loop and head on back to my friend's house, give her bike back. Right here, we're running 55, 58, somewhere in there. And this thing is super comfy. It's super comfy. And I'll tell you what, another pro I forgot to mention earlier, especially if you got a couple of years on you like I do. If that motorcycle has me leaned over too much, putting too much weight on my wrists, the first thing that gives out is my neck. I've got such bad discs in my neck. But the next thing is you get pretty damn tired of being hunched over. A bike with a nice upright position with maybe just a slight tilt forward is about the perfect configuration for me. And that's coming from a guy that spent years on super bikes, really committed kind of motorcycles. They're you can ride them really fast, but I don't know if you want to ride them for really long because they start to get pretty punishing. However, I did do an iron butt on my one of my Ducatis. I did a ride from Portland, Oregon to just outside Grand Junction, Colorado in less than 24 hours. And So let me tell you about all the whining and crying I did after I got there. Oh, I was pathetic. I sounded like a 6-year-old. Yeah, the MT-07 that I rode last weekend was definitely a little bit roomier. Not by much. Definitely a little bit roomier. But I would say the MT-07 too was a bit sportier. You were definitely leaning forward. One of the ways I found that out was whenever I was reviewing my footage and I realized that my camera angle had changed because I'm wearing the chest mount and it required me to lean forward a lot more, and so it changed the angle of my camera. But I don't think it, I thought the footage actually turned out kind of cool in spite of it, because I like videos where I can see, I want to see some of the road, but I also want to see the controls of the motorcycle, the hand motions, what the dash is saying. Those things kind of give me a reference as to what's going on at the moment. Yeah, you get more and more comfortable on this bike, and you're going to be hustling it down a back road with no problems at all. No problems. Oh, these blind hills. Yeah, at this point you can cut diamonds with my nipples. It is cold out here. Cold, I tell you. I'm not sure what the price on this one was. I can't remember how much she paid. $6,000, $7,000, somewhere in there. I think we got to adjust the chain on this thing too. I know it's got a long swing arm for a small displacement bike, but that chain just feels awful jerky. Especially on diesel. Nice old Roadster. Yes, I thought I'd make these videos because I've watched videos of people all over the world, and I love doing that. I love watching videos from just all over the place because I guess it kind of transports me to that place, and especially places I know I'll probably never get to go. Some of the countries and some of the beautiful sceneries and the beautiful rides and just the adventure of it that I know I'll probably never be able to do just based on the cost. You know, I'm a blue collar guy, so it's not very likely I'll be able to swing some of those kind of trips. But so I thought I'd make these videos, and people could see. Maybe people on the other side of the planet could watch these and see a little bit about the Pacific Northwest. We're in the news a lot, it seems, but not for the good things, unfortunately. But I'm sure that'll all change. Hopefully sooner. Oh yeah, chili. So I don't know if you noticed back there, though, at highway speed, how a little twitchiness starts to happen, and that's a product of a couple of things. One thing, of course, is the weight of the motorcycle, and then the other would be the wheelbase, and that was the twitchiness I was telling you about earlier on a smaller bike like this. Whereas longer wheelbase motorcycles will tend to be much more stable. They don't have that kind of twitchiness. And also depending on the aggressiveness of the steering geometry as well. The little imperfections in the road, like these lines, right now you won't really notice them, but boy, once you get up to speed, and they can start having some influence on the motorcycle. because, you know, the bike is moving really quickly now, and it's covering more of the imperfection faster, which I think tends to have a bit more of a profound effect on the twitchiness. And then, of course, a bike like this in high winds, it's going to get blown around like a rag doll. But I've had big touring bikes. If the wind's bad enough, they all get blown around like rag dolls. There's a place out here we ride that is considered one of the more unpleasant places for motorcycles to ride, and it's called the Columbia River Gorge. And up that gorge, when you're running it, especially if you're running westbound up the gorge, the winds can just be brutal in the afternoons. I can think of several occasions coming up that gorge, and some of the shear winds, the crosswinds, were so bad that they unexpectedly pushed the bike way out of its line. You know, you find yourself doing that counter steer, that body shift all the time, trying to counter it, and then hope you don't overdo it and send yourself completely off the line whenever the wind stops, or whenever the pressure's not as much, like gusting. And the headwinds coming up the gorge when you are heading westbound can be just brutal. Motorcycle, your gas mileage goes down by, 20 miles per gallon, because it's just trying to push against that hard wind. I think what the combined speed might be 50 mile an hour headwind and 60 mile an hour bike speed. You get there 110 miles an hour of pressure on that fairing. I'm not exactly sure if the math works out like that, but it sounds impressive, so I'm going to go with it. And then back into city driving. That's just a nice little loop out here I like to take sometimes. On afternoons like this, where it's just a bit too chilly to do any distance, I find nice little loops that I can spend about an hour, maybe 2 hours tops doing. And of course, in the shade, when the temperature gets cooler, in the shadows in those corners, boy, you gotta watch out. There'll be ice patches in them. You can be driving on dry pavement everywhere else, but you get in one of them corners and all of a sudden you are skating. Yeah, boy, if I did city commuting all the time, this bike would be a pretty high on my list of choices. Just perfect for this kind of stuff, commuting and dicing in and out of traffic. Super easy to change lines. Really easy to change your line. And of course this one with those little bags on the back. Those little bags on the back, a little run to the grocery store, not a problem. Unless you're buying like a bottle of wine. I'm not sure if you could fit one in there. I think you could if you tried. But, maybe some vegetables, something to put on the barbecue. And you could definitely get beer in it, but I could probably get beer in anything if I tried hard enough. I'm dedicated that way. Don't know what this guy's doing. He don't know either. Can't start out in a gear a little too high there. That big old long drive chain gets a little bit bucky. Yep, so older riders, beginning riders, experienced riders, I can see the value for every one of them on a bike like this. I had a DRZ 400 Supermoto at one point, and that bike was really a hoot. It was a blast. I think I turned left here. Dang it, wish I remembered this better. Last time I came over was in the fires, so I couldn't see anything. And I had the GPS running. Yeah, I'm on the right track. Yeah, they just don't ask that much of you. They just don't ask that much of you. Just hop on, throw some gas in the tank, turn the go-go knob, and you're out for a good time. And I think that they sell a crap load of these. I think it's a pretty popular bike. I know I looked at the 690 for quite some time. I was looking at the 690. I do like a big thumper. I got a 650 KLR in my garage that I've been riding for, geez, maybe 7 years, 8 years. It's just a big, simple, single-cylinder thumper. It's hard to beat that big chugga-chugga motor when you're just kind of lumping around the woods. I've done long distances on that too. I think for this one, for longer distances, I would definitely need to look at the suspension. It is a bit harsh. It doesn't feel super compliant over these kinds of bumps right here. I don't know if the camera's picking that up, but those little washboard kind of bumps definitely get it kind of bouncy a little bit. And we got the bicyclist. Gotta watch out for the walkers and the bicycles everywhere. I tell you, nearly everywhere you go out here in Oregon, you can find a nice, fun, twisty road in just about everywhere, places you wouldn't think. And I mean, here we're technically in the city, and there are still nice little twisty roads to run around on. They're not super high speed, but they don't have to be fun, as long as they're dry and not littered with bicycles. But these roads here are still wet. There's a sign back there too that says watch for ice. So I'm going to heed the warning. And rough road. I do love the sound of a single on deceleration. Lots of gravel there. So, until next time, keep the rubber side down and the helmet side up. We'll talk to you later.